You know, when you hear Israel and Iran in the same sentence, you probably think of one thing, conflict, right? Like they're on a nice edge. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? Not even close. Let's dig into this, because it gets weird.
I mean, look at the news today. It's all about them being bitter rivals, constantly on the brink of war. And yeah, that tension, it's shaping the entire Middle East, pushing everyone closer to a much bigger fight. Okay, but here's the twist. The thing that makes this whole story so fascinating. What if I told you these two sworn enemies or once secret allies? Yeah, you heard that right. So, how in the world did that happen? And more importantly, what went so wrong? All right, to get our heads around this, we've got to jump in the time machine. We're going back to an era when Iran was ruled by the Pahlavi dynasty. See, before 1979, things looked totally different. It was all built on that classic saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So check this out. Israel is founded in 1948, and just 2 years later, in 1950, Iran becomes one of the very first Muslim-majority nations to recognize it. Now hold on, it wasn't like they were opening a full-blown embassy with a big ceremony. It was de facto recognition. It basically meant Israel could have a diplomatic mission in Tehran. But still, it was a huge first step, one that really opened the door for what came next. So what was the thinking here? Well, for Israel, it all came down to something called the periphery doctrine. This was a strategy cooked up by their very first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. The idea was pretty clever. Since all their immediate Arab neighbors were hostile, why not just leapfrog over them? Build alliances with the non-Arab countries on the edges or the periphery of the Middle East. We're talking Iran, Turkey, Ethiopia. It was all about creating a strategic balance of power. And you know what the best glue for an unlikely friendship is? A common enemy. Or in this case, a couple of them. Both Israel and Iran were really worried about Gamal Abdel Nasser over in Egypt. His whole idea of pan-Arab nationalism was a threat to both of them. For Israel, it was obvious. For non-Arab Iran, it was a threat to their influence in the region. And on top of that, neither of them wanted to see the Soviet Union getting a bigger foothold in their backyard. This whole alliance was so bizarre, so out of left field, that one source put it perfectly. They said it was like if Batman and the Joker were to team up together. And honestly, that nails it. It really captures just how strange this whole thing was. And it wasn't just talk. They were cooperating on military and intelligence stuff behind the scenes. And yeah, this wasn't just some handshake deal. There were real concrete projects. Take the economy, for instance. They went 50-50 on building an oil pipeline specifically to get around Egypt's Suez Canal, which was closed to Israeli ships. It was a win-win. Iran had the oil and Israel had the pipeline to get it to Europe. But the military connection was just as important, if not more so. We've actually got declassified CIA documents that talk about this. One says, quote, Israel regularly sold armaments to Iran during the Shah's reign. Barter arrangements secured much-needed oil in return for arms and technical assistance. It was the definition of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of relationship. Arms for oil. Simple as that. So if everything was so cozy, how did we get to where we are today? Well, it all came crashing down with one single monumental event, the 1979 Iranian Revolution.
And when I say it changed things, I mean it was like an earthquake. The change was absolutely seismic. You had Iran going from this pro-Western monarchy to an Islamic republic that was deeply hostile to the West. And you can see it right here. The secret partner of Israel suddenly becomes its open, avowed enemy. Overnight.
And you gotta understand, this wasn't just a change in government. It was a total ideological flip. The new leaders in Tehran saw Israel as an extension of Western imperialism, basically a colonial project. So what did they do? They severed all ties, diplomatic, economic, everything. The Israeli mission in Tehran was kicked out. The friendship wasn't just on the rocks, it was officially dead and buried. But, and this is where it gets even more complicated, geopolitics is never black and white. Even after the revolution, when Iran was fighting that brutal war with Iraq in the 1980s, guess who was selling them weapons? Israel. This declassified CIA doc explains the logic. Israel figured, hey, if we help Iran just enough to keep the war going, it keeps two of our biggest enemies, Iran and Iraq, tied down and busy fighting each other. Absolutely ruthless realpolitik. Okay, so with direct contact totally gone, the conflict didn't just vanish, it just changed. It went underground, moving into the shadows. And this is where we see the dawn of the long, messy proxy war that defines the relationship today. So why fight in the shadows? Why not just go head-to-head? Well, this chart gives you a clue. You see, the massive population difference. Iran, with its size, could build up this huge network of proxy forces all over the region to do its bidding. Israel, being much smaller, had to rely more on its high-tech military and its strategic alliances to punch above its weight.
So the fight was no longer about land, it was about ideology. And there's another huge factor. Everyone pretty much assumed Israel had nuclear weapons by this point. That made a direct, all-out war a terrifying prospect for Iran. So what's the solution for both sides? You fight indirectly. You use other groups, you carry out covert operations, and you always maintain just enough plausible deniability to avoid a full-blown catastrophe. And here's what that proxy war actually looks like on the ground. Iran started pouring money and training into groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Meanwhile, on the other side, Israel has reportedly backed groups that oppose the Iranian regime from within, like the MEK, and also supported Kurdish groups. It's basically the old periphery doctrine, just, the covert ops version.
And here's the most ironic twist of all. The entire chessboard of the Middle East got flipped on its head. This quote from a former Israeli defense minister in 2017 says it all. Suddenly, Israel's old enemies, the Arab Sunni nations, are in the same boat with them. Why? Because they all started seeing a nuclear-armed Iran as the #1 threat to everybody.
For decades, this shadow war, as messy as it was, kind of had these unspoken rules, lines you didn't cross. But recently, all those rules have been thrown out the window. The fight has come exploding out of the shadows and into the open.
You can actually see how things picked up speed on this timeline. A huge turning point was the Syrian civil war, which kicked off in 2011. The chaos there was an opportunity for Iran to move its forces and advanced weapons right up to Israel's border. And Israel's response? Hundreds and hundreds of airstrikes to stop them. The proxy wars suddenly became a lot more direct.
So what's the trigger for this latest round of direct attacks? Well, a lot of analysts point to one thing: the potential for a history-making peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. For Tehran, an Israeli-Saudi alliance is their absolute worst nightmare, and the theory goes that Iran supported the attacks on October 7th for one specific reason: to blow that deal up before it could ever happen.
And if you want to understand the scale of Iran's commitment to the strategy, just look at this number. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars every single year, funneled to groups like Hezbollah, and they've been doing it since the 1980s. That kind of investment buys you a very powerful, very loyal army right on your enemy's doorstep.
Which, of course, brings us right up to the present moment. That long-simmering shadow war has finally boiled over. The fight has evolved. It's gone from covert ops and proxy battles to Iran launching ballistic missiles directly at Israel and Israel responding with strikes inside Iran. The gloves are off.
And so all of this leaves us with one huge, critical question. We've traced this incredible journey from secret partners bound by shared enemies to arch enemies locked in open conflict. After decades of this steady escalation, is there any way to de-escalate? Is there any path back from the brink?